the community of Jews. And he wanted to present Jesus as the one who gave the new law, the one who gave the new interpretation of the law on a mount, just like Moses had done years and years and years before. So as we look at the Beatitudes, we are looking at a compressed sermon. And it reminded me, as I thought about that, of the first sermon that I preached when I was in seminary, when I went way over time, and when I got done, my professor said, "Rob, you don't need to preach about everything you've ever wanted to preach on in the first and only, as if it were the only sermon you're ever going to say. You actually can spread out your ideas over, a longer period of time and not cram it all into one thing." But we do have this kind of condensed and crammed Sermon on the Mount, and what I hope to do as we unpack it is to see how every little piece of this sermon is a nugget of condensed wisdom that is valuable to us, and that probably is in and of itself enough for us to work on for the rest of our lives. And these first three Beatitudes, or blessings, are certainly that kind of nugget. So, blessed are those, or bendecidos, felices, bienaventurados. There are a lot of ways in which that first word is translated. But what's so ironic and odd about these first three things that Jesus calls blessings is that most of us would probably not consider any of them a blessing. It's a blessing to be poor in spirit. It's a blessing to be mourning. It's a blessing to be meek. How? How are those things blessings? Part of what I hear in Jesus' words is what over and over again in his preaching hits me. And that's that Jesus injects a wisdom that seems to turn upside down our common and typical understanding or experience, to give us insight that otherwise would be obscured to us. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Poverty of spirit, being poor in spirit, is not a description of depression or despondency. Poverty in spirit is a description which I think is best captured by step 1 in the 12-step wisdom. I have discovered, or we have discovered, that we are powerless over blank. Whatever it is you are powerless over. It could be many things. And that because of that, my life has become unmanageable. I've discovered that I am powerless over alcohol, over drugs, over sex, over shopping, over being angry, over whatever it is. And my life, as a result, has become unmanageable. I cannot get a hold of it. It keeps eluding me. I can't live it in a way that feels sane. Now, unmanageability can take a lot of different forms. The ways and the things over which we find ourselves enabled to be good managers can be many. They certainly can be addictions. And I have experienced in my own life and among people that I love enough addictive behavior to see just how horribly painful it is and unmanageable it is to be in a situation where you cannot get control of your own life. But it's not just substances that we get addicted to. We can get addicted to bad relationships. We can get addicted to bad habits in relationship. We can get addicted to emotional highs. We can get addicted to religious highs. We can get addicted to adrenaline rushes. we could get addicted to a lot of different things. And when those addictions or habits become so difficult to control, they end up taking over our life instead of our life being able to be ruling over them. Now, maybe you've experienced the ungovernability of your parent-child relationship. I know there were times for me when I had a really hard time figuring out how to govern my own emotional reactivity to some of the stuff that my kids were doing. And sometimes we get in a habit of using the same bludgeon to try and beat our kids into some form of disciplined obedience, and we do it over and over and over again, and nothing seems to change. In fact, it only gets worse. Which is what Albert Einstein called the definition of insanity. Doing the same thing over and over and over, expecting somehow that this time when I do this same thing, it's going to turn out different. And it never does. Believe me, it never does. It never does. But sometimes ungovernability in our lives can take the form of our intimate relationships. We get stuck in round and round and round patterns with the people with whom we are sharing our life most intimately, where we do this and they do that, and we do this and they do that, and we do this and they do that, and we do this and they do that. And before long, we're somewhere where none of us wants to be. And maybe it settles down for a little while, and then you find yourself 3 or 4 months later doing the same damn thing over again. That is ungovernability, unmanageability, being stuck in patterns that we don't know how to get out of. Poverty of spirit is the recognition that I'm out of control, that I don't have in myself, of myself, the ability to get out of that. John Philip Newell, in his prayer book, Praying for the Earth, Praying with the Earth, translates this particular beatitude this way. He says, "Blessed are those who know their need, for theirs is the grace of heaven." Because you see, it's just like not knowing how to do the math problems. If I don't recognize my need, if I don't recognize my lack of capacity, I won't ask for help. And so the very first step in our spiritual journey, which is the very first thing Jesus says in the Sermon on the Mount, is we have to recognize we need something more than we have to offer in and of ourselves. Step one. Step one. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. How is that a blessing? How is that a blessing? Mourning is about death and about loss. And nobody likes it. Death is painful. Loss is painful. But I would also submit that death and loss are incredible teachers if we allow them to be. In fact, Jesus turns to that theme over and over again in his own preaching. Whoever wants to save their life must lose it. Take up your death cross and follow me. Unless the seed dies, it cannot be born to new life. And those are images not just about our physical death. They are that. But they are also images about what spiritual dying and rising must occur in us for us to be able to live in the fullness of life that God offers and extends. I know in my own life, losing people who were dear to me has always been a painful but important reminder. One, that I'm going to die too. And it's important to remember that. Because if I carry on with the illusion that I am not going to die, then I have no sense of the fragility or the brevity or the preciousness of this life that I've been given. One of the things that death does for me is it rivets me back to the present and reminds me, this is right now the moment I have. I don't know if I'll have tomorrow. I could fall off a roof in the mission trip tomorrow, or be hit by a car the day after tomorrow, and it will be done. And have I lived in the present moment that I've been given? Have I given myself fully to the people around me? Have I offered the forgiveness that I need to offer? Have I expressed the love that I have in my heart? Have I given the love that I want to give? Death reminds us. Mourning, loss reminds us that all of those things are incredibly precious and not able to be done forever. But there's also that aspect of relinquishment and letting go of the things that we try to hold on to that is foundational and fundamental to our spiritual life. I believe with all my heart the single most important lesson in the spiritual journey is to learn how to let go. To learn how to live with open hands and not grasping hands. To learn how to let go of self and of egocentricity so that we can allow ourselves to serve something bigger than us. Which brings us to the last one. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Meekness is not a word you hear very much these days. And meekness is a word that we tend to associate with timidity and being insignificant or minimizing one's significance. But meekness is a word that was used very frequently in the discipline of training horses, horse training. A meek horse was a horse that was willing to accept the instruction of the rider. Horses are not timid animals. Horses are not weak animals. Horses are not unintelligent animals. Horses are incredibly powerful, and when you train a horse, you don't want a horse to lose its power. You want that horse to bring the full power of its person to whatever you are doing with them, whether it's running a race or pulling a plow. But here's what you do want. You want that horse to submit its strength to the guidance of the rider. And that's the lesson for us. Meekness is not about giving away your power. It's about bringing your power in submission to God's will and not your own. It's about bringing the full strength of who you are, the full strength of your character, the full strength of your abilities, the full strength of your talent, the full strength of your passion for life, and to lay it in God's hands and allow God to hold the reins and guide that strength and guide that power and use those gifts for God's purposes. And that is a lifelong challenge. That doesn't happen in one moment. It can begin in that moment when I turn my life over to God, deliberately and intentionally. But I tell you, it is a daily discipline to let my will become subject to God's will. To allow God to guide me and not just go where I want to go. So, 3 Beatitudes, the first 4 verses of the Sermon on the Mount. Do we know that we are in need? Are we willing to lay down our lives? Are we willing to submit our wills to our Creator? Now, I don't know about you, but that alone could be the work of a lifetime as a disciple of Jesus. And that's just the beginning. Let us pray. Amoroso Dios, por la gracia que nos ofreces en estas palabras de Jesús, palabras que nos indican un camino distinto a la que el mundo nos propone. Te damos gracias y pedimos el valor de poder seguirle y luchar diariamente para reconocer nuestra falta de conocimiento, la pobreza de nuestro espíritu, para poder aprender de la muerte y su enseñanza, y de poder someternos a tu santa voluntad en todo lo que hacemos. Por Cristo te lo pedimos. Amén.
Leave it to the anthem.
Blessed be